Lindsay, in this interview, we're going to talk about the origins of the debate over the administrative state. And we could, you trace it back to 2012 with Paul Ryan, and you say that it's an academic definition. What is that academic definition?
So the way that Paul Ryan describes it is that it's bureaucratic rule. And he sort of lodges this technical objection where he's like, look, executive delegation from the legislative branch essentially means that we have been beholden to a bureaucracy that we can't see. And so he sort of frames it to constituents as we could empower individuals or we could empower bureaucrats. And so he's just sort of saying, in terms of what the administrative state is, it's vast, it's unwieldy, it's not knowable. But he says, in times that Obama has been in office, we've created 159 new boards to do all the work of what they're trying to do with healthcare. And so it's this idea of expansion in the dark that people won't be able to see, know, touch, understand. That's a problem for him.
Did it get linked to the idea of individual liberty? Now, these days we don't talk about liberty as much as we talk about freedom, which I think of as synonyms, but maybe you could expand on that. But is that how the debate got framed, as you faceless bureaucrats versus individual liberty and freedom?
Yeah, that's the framing that he used is because he was talking about in the context of healthcare. So Obamacare has just been passed, or the Affordable Care Act and Patient Protection Act has just been passed, and he's worried that the administrative state is going to mismanage whatever it is they've been tasked with. And about this time, you might remember catchphrases like death panels, or the idea that you were going to have some government tribunal decide whether or not you would get life-saving treatment, if that was worth it or not. And so this sort of notion of there's going to be someone else from within inside the government second guessing choices that should be yours to have. Individuals should control your own destiny. It was that sort of idea, or the idea that government could ration off care, in contrast to something where you'd be more in control if you could just do this on your own. Now, I actually think that's probably a false dichotomy in reality, because anyone who's interacting with the American healthcare system is usually not just a free agent who gets to decide here's what's going to happen, yes or no, unless they're incredibly wealthy and paying on their own and can sort of dictate what's going to happen. Most people are going to go through some administrative procedure. It's probably just going to be with a private health insurer instead of the government.
The Supreme Court gets dragged into this debate, and both Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Thomas issued opinions questioning bureaucratic authority. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is really around Chevron deference, which is the idea that courts kind of changed their outlook on this. Originally, courts held that if Congress was delegating authority to the executive branch to make decisions, that's actually problematic because only Article 1, the legislative branch, has the ability to make policy. But over time, this changes to where we sort of recognize, or the courts recognize, that it's very hard for legislators to sort of conceive of every possible outcome for every realm of legislation that they may pass. And so they allow the Congress to pass laws that if there's rules that are interpretable by administrative agencies, then the courts will defer to that interpretation that the administrative agency has made if there's ever a case or suit brought before them. And it's that notion of Chevron deference that really started to animate people in this time frame between this 2012 to 2017, where both Chief Justice Roberts and Associate Justice Thomas, in some of their decisions, they do start issuing opinions that question Chevron deference and sort of set up what we see in the 10 years past, where we have a change on this in one of our most recent courts.
Is this part of the pushback against expertise and authority? Because it would seem to me that the deference that the court is referring to comes out of an agency's expertise in the particular area. Maybe they have scientific expertise, technical expertise, and I'm thinking primarily here as an example of the Environmental Protection Agency. But then we begin to I don't know when it began, but certainly now we've seen full-throated pushback against expertise and experts. And I'm just wondering if this is the beginning of it.
I don't know that I'd say it's the beginning of it because the Chevron case is determined in 1984, and this undertone of sort of anti-intellectualism precedes that court case. The notion that that's tied up with sort of conservative ideology or the way that conservative legislators are talking is something that we do see arc into the 2010s and 20 teens when we have this notion of you should be able to make your decisions. People who are in the bureaucracy, who might be lazy, is what some of them would say, or might not have your best interest at heart, won't be able to do it as well as you. So it's not just undercutting their expertise, it's sort of undercutting the notion that having people in these agencies, in these roles, speaks to this greater problem of government largesse, where instead of doing the work itself, it's sort of outsourcing it to people who they don't think are going to do it well and probably ought not be there in the first place. Despite the fact that we know in some of our very technical realms, so like in agriculture or environmental protection, you do have to have people who have advanced degrees or at least an advanced understanding of the specific scientific, biomedical, or agricultural realms that they have to think about in order to promulgate rules. So while it's true that it's an anti-intellectual, anti-expertise sort of orientation, some level of expertise is necessary in most of what happens in these agencies.
Yeah, when you mentioned agriculture, that sparked an idea on my part because 40 years ago, when I was doing my graduate work, my thesis was about agriculture, the diffusion of power farming machinery in agriculture. And while I was focused on Canada, our collection of data at that time was very poor. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's data, on the other hand, was very, very good. And they had economists on staff in well, even after the First World War, who were doing statistical analysis of, the cost of plowing an acre of land with horses versus that of a tractor. And it seems like my impression has always been that at least for the most part, the American bureaucracy has been like that, the best and the brightest. It really did have considerable expertise, which maybe, I guess if you think about it, might even have given the United States a leg up during that post, World War II in economic expansion. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And a lot of that has to do with sort of how FDR says we have some bigger problems that we're not going to be able to address unless we have some expertise to think about it. So when you're talking about agriculture, one of the programs that he institutes is the Civilian Conservation Corps, which is trying to feel like how can we determine or how can we get it so that we don't have any more dust bowls. And so they do things like reforest or they change irrigation patterns. So we're not going to have just, vast expanses of the plains that can be decimated by weather patterns. And so in this sort of like recognition that if we want to get something done throughout the United States, we're going to have some experts who sort of figure things out in a bigger way. The US does jumpstart these sorts of agencies into getting people who are thinking about it from an economic perspective, an agricultural perspective, environmental perspectives, longevity, conservation, all these different things. And so there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. And my take on US data is generally similar to yours. I think we have great data. I work with a lot of census data and research that I do, and I feel so lucky to have such granular times of data where I can see histories for a very long time. I can drill down on really good subjects. And we have things in every one of our agencies that look like that. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we had really good data on where we're having fatalities, hospitalizations, and this is all possible because of administrative underpinnings in data collection, data cleaning, and data transparency.
Lindsay, thank you very much for this. This is episode 2 of a multi-series interview with you. So thank you for your insights, and we'll look forward to episode 3.
Thanks so much.